The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Private Sarah Martinez adjusted her rifle scope for the third time in 10 minutes. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced with uncertainty. This was supposed to be a routine support mission, nothing more than backup for the main assault team below. She had never fired a shot in actual combat, despite months of training that had earned her the highest marksmanship scores in her unit. The ridge overlooked a valley where intelligence reports suggested enemy forces had established a temporary command post. Sarah's job was simple: watch, report, and provide covering fire if absolutely necessary. The real action would happen with Alpha Team, led by Sergeant Williams, who was currently moving through the lower terrain with 5 other soldiers. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead despite the cool mountain air. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than her gear. She had joined the military to serve her country, but also to prove something to herself and to her family back home in small-town Texas. Her father had been skeptical when she announced her decision to enlist, worried that his daughter wasn't cut out for military life. Her 3 brothers had all chosen different paths: college, trade work, and business, leaving Sarah as the only one drawn to service. Through her scope, she could see Alpha Team moving carefully between the scattered boulders and sparse vegetation. They were approximately 800 meters away, advancing toward what appeared to be an abandoned building complex. According to their briefing, this location had been identified through drone surveillance as a potential staging area for insurgent activities in the region. The radio crackled softly in her ear. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Leader. We're approaching the target building. Any movement on your end?" Sarah scanned the area methodically, her training taking over. "Alpha Leader, this is Overwatch. No visible activity. The compound appears quiet. I have clear sightlines on your approach route. Copy, Overwatch. Maintain watch. We're going in." As Alpha Team disappeared behind a cluster of rocks near the building, Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with high-stress situations. She controlled her breathing, remembering her instructor's words: calm mind, steady hands, clear shot. The mantra had served her well during countless hours on the training range, but this was different. This was real. The compound consisted of 3 main structures arranged in a rough triangle, with what appeared to be a central courtyard. From her elevated position, Sarah could see most of the layout, though some areas remained hidden behind walls and overhanging roofs. The buildings looked weathered and partially damaged, suggesting they had been abandoned for some time. Minutes passed in tense silence. Sarah's radio remained quiet except for occasional check-ins from base camp. The sun climbed higher, and she adjusted her position slightly to avoid a glare that was beginning to interfere with her scope. Her legs were starting to cramp from maintaining the same prone position, but she knew better than to move unnecessarily. A flash of movement caught her attention. Through her scope, she spotted a figure moving quickly between 2 buildings, someone Alpha Team couldn't possibly see from their position. The person appeared to be carrying something, possibly a weapon, though the distance and brief sighting made it difficult to confirm. "Alpha Leader, this is Overwatch. I have movement in the compound. Single individual moving between buildings 2 and 3. Copy, Overwatch. Can you confirm hostile intent?" Sarah tracked the area where she had seen the movement, but the figure had vanished. "Negative confirmation on hostile intent. Individual is no longer visible." The radio went quiet again. Sarah knew that Sergeant Williams was making tactical decisions based on incomplete information, a reality of military operations that training could only partially prepare them for. She continued scanning, aware that her role as Overwatch meant she might be the only early warning system Alpha Team had. Suddenly, the crack of gunfire echoed through the valley. Sarah's heart jumped as she heard multiple weapons firing simultaneously. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes from several positions around the compound. Alpha Team had walked into an ambush. "Overwatch. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support." Sergeant Williams's voice was strained but controlled. Sarah's training kicked in. She began systematically scanning for targets, looking for clear shots that wouldn't endanger Alpha Team. The enemy positions were well concealed, with shooters firing from windows, doorways, and what appeared to be prepared fighting positions. "Alpha Leader, I'm searching for clear targets. Keep your heads down." The firefight intensified. Sarah could see Alpha Team had taken cover behind a low stone wall, but their position was exposed to fire from at least 3 directions. Through her scope, She identified an enemy position on the roof of the central building where a shooter was directing fire down onto Alpha Team's location. The distance was challenging, nearly 900 meters with a slight crosswind. Sarah had made similar shots during training, but never under these conditions, never with lives hanging in the balance. She adjusted her scope settings, accounting for wind and elevation, and controlled her breathing. Just as she was about to take the shot, movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. A group of armed figures was approaching Alpha Team's position from a blind spot, moving to flank them. If they succeeded, Alpha Team would be surrounded with no escape route. Sarah faced a split-second decision. The rooftop shooter was an immediate threat, but the flanking force would be catastrophic. She shifted her aim toward the approaching group, knowing that engaging multiple targets would be the most difficult shooting scenario she had ever attempted. The first shot felt like it happened in slow motion. Sarah squeezed the trigger with the precise pressure she had practiced thousands of times. The rifle's recoil was familiar, but the knowledge that this shot was meant to stop a human being, not a paper target, made everything feel surreal. Through her scope, she saw one of the flanking figures drop. The others scattered, seeking cover, their advance halted. Sarah didn't have time to process what she had just done. The rooftop shooter was still actively firing on Alpha Team, and she could see one of the soldiers below appeared to be injured. She shifted back to the rooftop position and fired again. This time, the shooting from that location stopped. Sarah continued scanning for threats, her mind completely focused on the tactical situation. The emotional impact of what she was doing would come later. Right now, she was a soldier doing her job. The firefight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Sarah engaged several more targets, each shot carefully aimed and purposeful. She could hear radio chatter from other units responding to the situation, but her world had narrowed to what she could see through her scope and the immediate needs of Alpha Team. Gradually, the enemy fire diminished. Sarah could see movement as hostile forces began withdrawing from their positions. Alpha Team was still pinned down but no longer under immediate threat of being overrun. Alpha Leader, enemy forces appear to be withdrawing. I count at least 4 down. Can you confirm your status? Overwatch, we have 1 wounded but stable. Outstanding shooting. You saved our asses up there. As the immediate danger passed, Sarah became aware of her surroundings again. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she realized she had been holding her breath. The scope of what had just happened began to sink in. She had fired her weapon in combat for the first time, and those shots had made the difference between life and death for her fellow soldiers. The radio crackled with new voices as backup units arrived and medical evacuation was coordinated. Sarah maintained her overwatch position, continuing to scan for threats, but the adrenaline was beginning to wear off, replaced by a mix of emotions she couldn't quite identify. Later, as she watched Alpha Team successfully extract with their wounded soldier, Sarah reflected on how quickly everything had changed. She had woken up that morning as a soldier who had never seen combat. Now she was someone who had faced the ultimate test of her training and capabilities. The sun was beginning to set when she finally received orders to move from her position. As she packed her equipment, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed within her. The weight of responsibility she had felt that morning was nothing compared to the weight she carried now, the knowledge that her actions had directly saved lives. The hike back to base camp gave her time to think. She knew there would be debriefings, reports to file, and questions to answer. But, more than that, she knew she would have to process what she had done and what it meant for who she was becoming as a soldier and as a person. Her radio buzzed with a message from base: all units, excellent work today. Debrief at 2,100 hours. Sarah acknowledged and continued walking, knowing that her real journey was just beginning. The debrief room at Forward Operating Base Falcon was smaller than Sarah had expected, with fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead and created harsh shadows on the concrete walls. She sat at a metal table across from Captain Rodriguez, the company commander, while Sergeant Williams occupied a chair to her left. The wounded soldier from Alpha Team, Private Johnson, was recovering in the medical facility but was reportedly stable. Captain Rodriguez reviewed a tablet displaying preliminary reports from the engagement. Private Martinez, your shooting today was exceptional. Sergeant Williams credits you with preventing a complete disaster. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the praise. While she appreciated the recognition, the reality of what had happened was still settling in her mind. I was just doing my job, sir.
following my training.
Your training prepared you well, but what you did out there went beyond basic marksmanship. You made tactical decisions under pressure that saved lives. The captain looked up from his tablet. I'm recommending you for commendation, and there's going to be some interest from higher command about today's action.
Sergeant Williams nodded in agreement. Captain, Private Martinez's positioning and shot selection were textbook perfect.
She had multiple target opportunities and prioritized based on threat assessment. That's advanced tactical thinking. The conversation continued for another hour, covering every detail of the engagement. Sarah answered questions about her sightlines, decision-making process, and equipment performance. Throughout the debrief, she maintained a professional demeanor, but internally she was struggling with conflicting emotions.
When the formal session ended, Sergeant Williams walked with Sarah toward the barracks.
The base was quiet in the evening hours, with only essential personnel moving between buildings. The distant sound of generators provided a constant background hum.
How are you holding up, Martinez?
Williams asked as they paused outside her quarters.
Honestly, Sergeant, I'm not sure. Everything happened so fast today. I keep replaying it in my mind.
Williams stopped walking and turned to face her.
That's normal. First combat experience affects everyone differently.
What you did today was significant, and it's going to change how command sees you.
Are you prepared for that? Sarah wasn't sure she understood what he meant. Prepared how, Sergeant?
Your shooting skills just got noticed at levels way above company command. Word travels fast in the military, especially when someone makes impossible shots look routine.
You might find yourself getting opportunities you weren't expecting. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the day's events and Williams's words.
She had joined the military with clear goals: serve honorably, develop her skills, and prove herself capable. But she hadn't considered that exceptional performance might bring unwanted attention or complicate her straightforward plans. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. Private Lisa Chen, her bunkmate and closest friend on base, entered with 2 cups of coffee.
Figured you might want to talk, Chen said, handing Sarah one of the cups.
Word's already spreading about what happened today.
Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully.
Chen was a communications specialist who had deployed with Sarah's unit but hadn't been involved in the day's mission.
She was also someone Sarah trusted to give honest perspectives. It's weird, Lisa. This morning I was just another soldier doing backup duty. Now everyone's talking about me like I'm some kind of hero.
Chen sat on the edge of her own bunk across from Sarah.
Maybe because you are. Johnson's alive because of your shooting.
The whole Alpha team is intact because you knew what to do when it mattered.
But I was just following my training. I saw threats, I engaged them. It wasn't heroic, it was just necessary.
That's exactly what makes it heroic, Chen replied.
You didn't freeze up, you didn't hesitate when people needed you. Not everyone can do that under pressure.
They talked late into the night, discussing not just the day's events but also their larger questions about military service, personal identity, and what it meant to take on life-or-death responsibilities. Sarah found Chen's perspective helpful in processing her experience.
The next morning brought new developments.
Sarah was summoned to the command post earlier than usual, where she found Captain Rodriguez waiting with an officer she didn't recognize, a tall man with silver eagles on his collar indicating a colonel's rank.
Private Martinez, this is Colonel Hayes from Division Headquarters. He'd like to speak with you about yesterday's engagement.
Colonel Hayes was an imposing figure with a direct manner of speaking.
Private, I've reviewed the after-action reports from yesterday's mission.
Your performance was remarkable. I understand you made multiple successful engagements at ranges exceeding 800 meters under combat conditions.
Yes, sir. The targets presented clear threats to Alpha Team's position.
I'm not questioning your tactical decisions, Private.
I'm impressed by your execution. Tell me about your marksmanship background.
Sarah explained her training progression, from basic rifle instruction through advanced marksmanship courses. She mentioned her high scores during training and her natural aptitude for long-range shooting, but emphasized that she had never expected to use these skills in actual combat situations. Colonel Hayes listened carefully, occasionally asking specific questions about her equipment, training methods, and personal shooting philosophy.
Sarah got the impression he was evaluating her for something beyond just commendation. Private Martinez, how would you feel about specialized training opportunities? Advanced courses that would further develop your marksmanship capabilities?
Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension.
Sir, I'm honored by any opportunities the Army sees fit to offer.
My goal is to serve effectively wherever I'm needed.
Good answer. You'll be hearing from my office soon about some possibilities. Keep up the excellent work.
After Colonel Hayes left, Captain Rodriguez explained that Division was always looking for soldiers with exceptional shooting abilities for specialized roles. He couldn't provide specific details, but suggested Sarah should be prepared for significant changes to her current assignment.
Over the following days, Sarah noticed subtle shifts in how others treated her.
Fellow soldiers showed increased respect, and some seemed to view her with a mixture of admiration and wariness. The attention made her uncomfortable, as she preferred to focus on her duties rather than her growing reputation. Sergeant Williams assigned her to additional training exercises, including advanced observation and reporting drills. If you're going to be noticed by higher command, we need to make sure you're prepared for whatever comes next, he explained.
Sarah threw herself into the training with characteristic determination.
She practiced long-range shooting under various conditions, studied tactical communication procedures, and worked on physical conditioning. The routine helped her process the emotional aftermath of her first combat experience while preparing for future challenges. One evening, while cleaning her rifle after a training session, Sarah received a message to report to the communications center. A secured call was waiting for her, something unusual for a private. The voice on the other end was professional but unfamiliar. Private Martinez, this is Major Stevens from Special Operations Command.
I understand you've had some recent success with long-range marksmanship. Sarah's pulse quickened.
Special Operations Command wasn't something most regular Army soldiers ever dealt with directly.
Yes, sir. I was providing overwatch support for a team engagement. We'd like to discuss some opportunities with you. Can you be available for an interview next week?
The conversation was brief and cryptic, but Sarah understood that her military career was about to take an unexpected direction. When she hung up, she sat alone in the communications center, contemplating how one day of combat had somehow changed everything. That night, she called home for the first time since the engagement. Her mother answered, and Sarah could hear the familiar sounds of home in the background, her father watching television, one of her brothers arguing with someone on the phone.
Sarah, we've been thinking about you. How are things over there?
Sarah struggled with how much to share. Military families learn to read between the lines of carefully worded phone calls, but she didn't want to worry her parents unnecessarily.
Things are going well, Mom. I've been getting some recognition for my work. There might be some new opportunities coming up.
That's wonderful, honey. We're so proud of you.
Your father was just saying yesterday how you've really found your place in the Army.
After the call ended, Sarah reflected on how true her mother's words were. She had found her place, though not in the way she had originally expected. The scared young woman who had left Texas was becoming someone stronger and more capable, but also someone carrying responsibilities she was still learning to understand. The weight of what lay ahead felt both exciting and daunting. Sarah knew that whatever came next would test not just her shooting abilities, but her character and determination in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The helicopter ride to Fort Bragg was Sarah's first time leaving the forward operating base since her deployment began 6 months earlier. Through the aircraft's small window, she watched the landscape change from the rugged terrain she had grown accustomed to, back to the more familiar geography of North Carolina. The Special Operations Command interview that Major Stevens had mentioned was scheduled for the following morning. Sarah carried with her a thick file containing her complete military record, performance evaluations, and detailed reports from her recent combat engagement. Captain Rodriguez had reviewed everything with her before departure, emphasizing that this opportunity was rare for someone with her limited experience. Remember, Martinez, they wouldn't be flying you back stateside if they weren't seriously interested.
Special Operations doesn't waste time on curiosity interviews.
Be honest about your capabilities and limitations, but don't undersell yourself. The guest quarters at Fort Bragg were more comfortable than anything Sarah had experienced during her deployment. She spent the evening reviewing her training records and trying to prepare for questions she might face. The uncertainty of what Special Operations Command wanted from her made preparation difficult. The next morning, Sarah reported to a nondescript building on the base where Major Stevens was waiting. He was younger than she had expected, probably in his mid-30s, with the lean build and alert demeanor she associated with special operations personnel.
Private Martinez, thank you for making the trip. Before we begin, I want you to understand that everything we discuss today is classified. Even the fact that you're here is not something you should share with anyone.
The interview room was spare but comfortable, with a conference table and chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, and no windows. Major Stevens was joined by two other officers Sarah didn't recognize, both wearing subdued uniforms without visible unit insignia.
We've reviewed your file extensively, Private.
Your marksmanship scores are exceptional, but what interests us more is your performance under pressure. Tell us about your decision-making process during the engagement 2 weeks ago. Sarah walked them through her actions step by step, from initial observation through target engagement. The officers asked detailed questions about her thought processes, how she prioritized targets, and what factors influenced her tactical decisions. You engaged multiple targets at significant range under combat conditions.
Most soldiers never fire their weapons in actual combat. How do you think you were able to perform so effectively?
Sarah considered the question carefully. Sir, I think my training prepared me well technically, but what helped most was staying focused on the mission. Alpha Team needed support, and I had the capability to provide it.
I didn't really have time to think about anything except what needed to be done.
One of the unidentified officers leaned forward.
Private, how do you handle stress?
What we're considering would involve significantly more pressure than what you've experienced so far. I've found that focusing on my training and the immediate task helps me stay calm. During the engagement, I wasn't thinking about the broader situation or consequences, just about making accurate shots to protect my teammates. The interview continued for over 2 hours, covering her background, motivations for military service, family situation, and personal goals. The officers seemed particularly interested in her psychological profile and ability to work independently. Private Martinez, we're considering you for a specialized training program. If selected, you would undergo approximately 6 months of intensive instruction in advanced marksmanship, reconnaissance, and related skills.
The training is extremely demanding, both physically and mentally. Many candidates don't complete the program. Major Stevens paused to let this information sink in.
The role this training prepares you for involves long-range reconnaissance and precision shooting in support of special operations missions. You would often work alone or with minimal support, sometimes for extended periods.
Are you interested in learning more?
Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was far beyond anything she had imagined when she first enlisted.
Sir, I'm honored to be considered. Could you tell me more about what the training involves?
The detailed briefing that followed was unlike anything in Sarah's previous military experience. The training program combined advanced marksmanship with survival skills, communications, intelligence gathering, and psychological preparation for high-stress operations.
Successful graduates would be assigned to support special operations teams on missions requiring precision shooting capabilities.
The physical demands are significant, one of the officers explained. You'd need to be able to carry heavy equipment over long distances, remain motionless for hours at a time, and function effectively under severe sleep deprivation and other stressors.
The psychological requirements are equally important, Major Stevens added. You would often be the only person in a position to make critical decisions.
There's no backup plan when you're alone on a ridge 2 kilometers from your target. Sarah listened intently, asking questions about equipment, typical mission duration, and how this role fit into larger military operations.
The more she learned, the more intrigued she became, despite recognizing the enormous challenges involved. Private, we need a decision soon.
The next training class begins in 3 weeks. If you're selected and accept, you would leave your current unit immediately and begin preparation here at Fort Bragg. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. Accepting would mean leaving behind everything familiar, her unit, her friends like Lisa Chen, and the relatively straightforward role she had grown comfortable with. It would also mean committing to a level of responsibility and risk she had never anticipated.
Sir, may I have until tomorrow morning to decide?
This is a significant change from what I had planned for my military career.
Of course. Take the time you need to think it through.
This decision will affect not just your immediate future, but potentially your entire military service. That evening, Sarah walked around Fort Bragg, trying to process everything she had learned. The base was bustling with activity even in the evening hours, and she noticed the purposeful movement of soldiers who clearly belonged to specialized units. Everyone seemed focused and professional in a way that suggested they were part of something important. She found a quiet spot near the base chapel and called Lisa Chen using a secure phone. Without revealing classified details, Sarah tried to explain her situation. "So you're being offered some kind of advanced training opportunity?" Chen asked. "Something like that. It's significant. It would change everything about what I'm doing in the military. Sarah, you've always been exceptional at what you do. If they're offering you advanced training, it's because they see potential in you that maybe you don't even see in yourself. But what if I'm not ready for this level of responsibility? What if I fail?" Chen's voice was firm. "You saved lives 2 weeks ago because you were ready when it mattered. You didn't fail then, and you won't fail now. The question isn't whether you can do it, it's whether you want to." After the call, Sarah spent hours walking and thinking. She considered her original motivations for military service and how this opportunity aligned with her goals. She thought about the trust being placed in her and the potential impact she could have in this new role. The next morning, Sarah reported to Major Stevens's office with her decision. "Sir, I would be honored to accept the training opportunity. I understand the challenges involved, and I'm committed to meeting the standards required." Major Stevens smiled for the first time since she had met him. "Outstanding, Private. Welcome to a very different kind of military service. Report to Building 1542 tomorrow morning at 0500 hours. Bring only personal essentials, everything else will be provided." As Sarah left the building, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her life was about to change dramatically, and she would be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But she also felt a sense of rightness about the decision, as if this opportunity was a natural progression from everything that had led her to that ridge 2 weeks earlier. The phone call home that evening was difficult. Without revealing specific details, Sarah told her parents she was being assigned to specialized training that would last several months. "We're proud of you, honey," her father said. "You've always been determined to prove yourself, and it sounds like you're getting that chance." Her mother's voice carried a note of worry. "Just promise us you'll be careful, Sarah. We know you can handle whatever they ask of you, but we want you to come home safe." As Sarah packed her few belongings that night, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning on the ridge. She was no longer just Private Martinez providing backup support. She was becoming something new, though she wasn't yet sure exactly what that meant. The only certainty was that there was no going back to who she had been before. The alarm clock showed 0430 hours when Sarah woke on her first day of specialized training. She had been at Fort Bragg for 3 days, completing medical evaluations, security clearance updates, and administrative processing. Now the real work would begin. Building 1542 was a converted aircraft hangar that housed the training facility for what she had learned was officially called the Precision Engagement Program. Sarah arrived to find 11 other soldiers, all carrying similar orders and wearing the same expression of nervous anticipation. The group was diverse in background. Some were experienced snipers from various units, others were soldiers like Sarah who had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions. What they shared was a proven ability to perform under pressure and complete dedication to their military service. "Good morning. I'm Master Sergeant Collins, and, for the next 6 months, I will be responsible for determining whether any of you have what it takes to graduate from this program." Collins was a compact man in his early 40s with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years in the field. His manner was professional but intimidating, and Sarah sensed immediately that he would accept nothing less than perfection. "Look around you. Statistically, fewer than half of you will complete this training. The rest will return to your previous units with the knowledge that you tried and couldn't meet the standard. There's no shame in that, but there's also no compromise on requirements." The first week was a brutal introduction to what lay ahead. Physical training began before dawn with runs that stretched Sarah's endurance beyond anything she had experienced. The academic curriculum covered advanced ballistics, meteorology, camouflage and concealment, and tactical communication procedures. Sarah's fellow trainees were impressive individuals. Sergeant Thompson was a veteran sniper with multiple deployments who made every shot look effortless. Corporal Williams had grown up hunting in Alaska and possessed an intuitive understanding of long-range shooting that amazed their instructors.
Private Kim was a former competitive shooter who brought technical precision that bordered on scientific.
Despite her initial concerns about fitting in with such experienced personnel, Sarah found that her recent combat experience gave her credibility with the group. Her performance on the ridge had become part of her reputation, and the other trainees respected her proven ability to perform when lives were at stake. The training was designed to break down everything they thought they knew about shooting and rebuild their capabilities from the ground up. Master Sergeant Collins insisted that what they had learned in basic marksmanship was merely the foundation for what they would need to master.
Forget everything you think you know about shooting. In this program, you will learn to make shots that most people consider impossible. You will operate in conditions where failure means mission failure, and mission failure means people die. Classroom instruction covered topics Sarah had never considered. She learned how humidity affects bullet trajectory at extreme ranges, how to calculate shooting solutions using minimal data, and how to estimate range using objects of known size. The technical complexity was overwhelming at first, but gradually began to make sense as she practiced applying the concepts. Field exercises started with basic height construction and moved progressively to complex scenarios involving target identification, range estimation, and precise shooting under time pressure. Sarah discovered that her natural shooting ability was only part of what would be required. The mental discipline needed to remain motionless for hours while maintaining peak alertness was exhausting. One particularly challenging exercise involved remaining hidden in a prepared position for 12 hours while observers actively searched for the trainees. Sarah learned to control not just her breathing and movement, but even her thought processes, maintaining focus despite discomfort, boredom, and physical strain. "Martinez, your shooting is solid, but you need to work on patience," Collins told her during a critique session. "Sometimes the mission requires waiting for the perfect shot rather than taking the first available opportunity." Can you maintain discipline for hours when you know you could end the situation immediately?
Sarah found this aspect of training more difficult than the physical demands. Her instinct was to act decisively when she identified a target, but the scenarios often required waiting for optimal conditions or specific timing. Learning to suppress her natural inclinations while remaining ready to act instantly was a delicate balance. The psychological component of training was unlike anything she had experienced. The program included sessions with military psychologists who evaluated each trainee's mental resilience and ability to function independently. Sarah learned that precision shooters often worked alone for extended periods, making critical decisions without immediate support or guidance.
Private Martinez, how do you handle isolation? Your role would often involve operating independently, sometimes for days or weeks with minimal contact with other personnel. Sarah had always been comfortable with solitude, but she had never considered spending weeks alone in hostile territory. The training exercises that simulated this isolation were mentally challenging, requiring her to maintain focus and decision-making capability despite loneliness, uncertainty, and stress. Month 3 brought advanced equipment training. Sarah learned to use sophisticated optics, range-finding devices, and communication systems that were far beyond standard military equipment. Each piece of gear required hours of practice to master, and the integration of multiple systems while maintaining shooting accuracy demanded constant attention to detail. The rifles they trained with were custom-built precision instruments that could engage targets at ranges exceeding a mile under optimal conditions. Sarah marveled at the engineering involved, but also understood that the equipment was only as good as the person using it. Technical proficiency with the tools was essential, but judgment and tactical awareness remained the most important factors. Physical conditioning continued throughout the program, with emphasis on functional strength rather than just cardiovascular fitness. Sarah learned to carry heavy equipment loads over long distances while maintaining the stability needed for precise shooting. Her body adapted gradually to the demands, becoming stronger and more resilient than she had thought possible. Combat scenarios became increasingly complex and realistic. Sarah found herself operating in simulated urban environments, wilderness settings, and situations that required rapid movement between multiple shooting positions. Each scenario tested different aspects of her training while requiring integration of all her developing skills. One exercise that particularly challenged Sarah involved supporting a simulated hostage rescue operation. She was positioned nearly a kilometer from the target building with instructions to neutralize specific threats while avoiding harm to hostages or friendly forces. The pressure of knowing that real operations would involve similar stakes was intense. Your shot placement was perfect, Martinez, but your timing was off. In a real situation, that 3-second delay could have meant the difference between success and tragedy. Collins's feedback was always direct and constructive, but Sarah felt the weight of responsibility more acutely with each exercise. The bond between trainees strengthened as they progressed through the program. They supported each other through the most challenging aspects of training, sharing knowledge and encouraging persistence when individuals struggled with particular skills. Sarah developed close friendships with several classmates who understood the unique pressures they were all facing. During month 4, Sarah received news that would test her focus on training. Sergeant Williams from her original unit had been wounded during a patrol operation at her former base. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but knowing that her friends were continuing to face danger while she was in training created emotional conflict. "Martinez, I understand you received some difficult news from your previous unit," Master Sergeant Collins said during a private meeting. "This is part of what makes this job challenging. You have to maintain focus on your current mission while knowing that others are facing risks you can't help with directly. It's hard to concentrate on training when I know my friends are in danger, Master Sergeant. Part of me feels like I should be there with them. That's a natural feeling, but you need to understand that the best way to help them now is to become the most capable soldier you can be. The skills you're developing here will enable you to support operations that save lives on a much larger scale." Collins's words helped Sarah refocus on her training with renewed purpose. She began to see the program not as a personal advancement opportunity, but as preparation to make a meaningful contribution to military operations and the safety of other soldiers. By month 5, the training had transformed not just Sarah's capabilities but her entire approach to military service. She had developed an almost supernatural awareness of her environment, the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and shooting skills that seemed impossible even to her. More importantly, she had gained confidence in her ability to make life-and-death decisions independently. The final month would test everything she had learned in scenarios designed to simulate real-world operations. Sarah knew that graduation was not guaranteed and that the most challenging aspects of training lay ahead. But she also knew that she had already become a fundamentally different soldier than the one who had reported to Building 1542 5 months earlier.